The day a Mafia king threw away his crown for a girl covered in mud. That's what they whispered in the underworld afterward. But nobody tells you what really happened in those final seconds before Ethan Cross made the choice that would burn his empire to the ground. Nobody talks about the blood on the roses, the screams that shattered the stone walls, or the way a man who'd killed without mercy fell to his knees, not in surrender, but in rebellion against everything he'd built. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. The late afternoon sun hung low over the Cross estate like a warning, casting long shadows across manicured gardens that had witnessed more secrets than most graveyards. Ethan Cross stood at the edge of the circular driveway, his black Mercedes idling behind him, engine purring with the same quiet menace that defined everything he touched. The mansion before him, a fortress of gray stone and iron gates, had been in his family for 3 generations, each bloodier than the last. He adjusted his tie, Italian silk worth more than most men made in a month, and checked his reflection in the car's tinted window. Sharp jawline, cold eyes the color of winter steel, hair slicked back with precision. Everything about Ethan Cross was controlled, calculated, and lethal. In his left hand, he carried 24 blood-red roses, their stems wrapped in black velvet. In his right pocket, a diamond ring caught the dying light, 3 carats, princess cut, set in platinum. Worth $250,000, but to Ethan, it represented something far more valuable, the sealing of an alliance. Vanessa Cole wasn't just beautiful. She was strategic. The daughter of the Cole crime family controlled the Eastern Seaboard's pharmaceutical distribution, legal and otherwise. Their marriage would unite 2 empires, creating an unstoppable force that would make the other families bow or bleed. Tonight was supposed to be perfect. Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Marcus, his head of security. "Everything's in place, boss. The staff cleared out like you ordered. Just you, Miss Cole, and the garden crew finishing up the rose beds." Ethan frowned. "I said everyone out. The gardeners refused payment to leave early, said they'd finish by 6. Want me to remove them?" He checked his watch. 5:47 p.m. "Let them work. They'll be gone before I need them to be." He pocketed the phone and started toward the main entrance. Roses held carefully, mind rehearsing the proposal he'd practiced in the mirror that morning. Vanessa expected grandeur. She expected power. And Ethan Cross always delivered. The front doors swung open before he reached them. Vanessa stood framed in the entrance like a painting, a vision in a crimson dress that hugged every deliberate curve, her dark hair cascading over bare shoulders, lips painted the color of fresh wounds. "Ethan," she purred, descending the stone steps with the grace of a panther, "you're late." "Traffic," he lied smoothly, offering the roses. She took them without looking, passing them immediately to a maid who'd appeared from nowhere. Vanessa's eyes, sharp, calculating, always measuring, swept over him. "You look tense." "Never." "Liar." She traced a manicured nail down his lapel. "But I'll forgive you. Tonight's important, isn't it?" He caught her wrist, gentle but firm. "Walk with me." They moved through the mansion's grand entrance hall, past oil paintings of dead cross patriarchs who'd built their fortune on bootlegging, extortion, and murder. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. Everything gleamed with the polish of old money and new violence. Vanessa's heels clicked a rhythm that echoed like gunshots. "The garden?" she asked, reading his direction. "The garden," he confirmed. They passed through the conservatory, all glass and wrought iron, filled with exotic orchids that cost more to maintain than most people's mortgages. Beyond the glass doors lay the estate's crown jewel, 5 acres of landscape architecture, featuring Italian fountains, Japanese maples, and rose gardens that bloomed year-round through a combination of greenhouses and Ethan's absolute refusal to accept seasonal limitations. The evening air carried the scent of jasmine and recently turned earth. Somewhere in the distance, a fountain gurgled. Birds called from the trees. It should have been romantic. Ethan's hand found the ring box in his pocket. "Vanessa!" "Wait." She stopped, tilting her head. "Do you hear that?" He listened. Beneath the fountain's white noise, beneath the birdsong, humming. Someone was humming while they worked. They rounded the corner of the main path, and the rose garden came into view. Terraced beds cascaded down a gentle slope, each level a riot of colors: crimson, white, peach, yellow. At the bottom, near the stone retaining wall, a figure knelt in the dirt. Ethan's preparation evaporated. The girl couldn't have been more than 22, 23 at most. She wore mud-stained overalls over a faded gray t-shirt, her auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun with wisps escaping around her face. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, patting soil around a newly planted rosebush, fingers dark with earth. She was humming something soft, something old, a melody Ethan's grandmother used to sing while she cooked. The girl looked up, and Ethan's world tilted. Her eyes were the color of honey in sunlight, wide and startled as a deer's. Dirt smudged her cheek. Her hands froze mid-motion. For a single, suspended moment, she simply stared at him with an expression that combined recognition, fear, and something else he couldn't name. Then she scrambled to her feet, nearly falling in her haste. "Mr. Cross," she stammered, wiping her hands frantically on her overalls. I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were... I was told to finish the roses and I... Who are you?" The question came out harder than he'd intended. "Lila Hayes, sir. I work for Greenscape Gardens. We do your landscaping." Her voice was soft, nervous, with a trace of somewhere south. "I can go. I'm almost done. I just need to... You're still here." Vanessa's voice cut through the garden like a knife through silk. Ethan specified no staff. Lila's face went pale. "I didn't mean... Mr. Torres said it was okay if I finished. Mr. Torres doesn't give orders on this estate." Vanessa descended the path with predatory grace, each step deliberate. "I'm curious, dear. What exactly makes you think you're important enough to disobey?" "I wasn't disobeying, ma'am. I just..." "Ma'am." Vanessa laughed, the sound crystalline and cruel. "How quaint." "Ethan, is this what you hire? Farm girls who don't know their place?" Ethan opened his mouth. To say what? He wasn't sure. But Vanessa was already moving closer to Lila, circling her like a shark scenting blood. "Look at you," Vanessa continued, her voice dripping false sympathy. "Covered in dirt. Do you even own a mirror? Or do they not have those where you're from?" Lila's hands clenched into fists at her sides, but she kept her eyes down. "I'm sorry for the intrusion. I'll leave now." She bent to gather her tools, a trowel, a pair of pruning shears, a half-empty bag of fertilizer, but Vanessa's hand shot out, gripping Lila's wrist with surprising strength. "Did I say you could leave?" The garden fell silent. Even the birds seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere. Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. Unease. "Vanessa, I'm handling this." Vanessa's eyes never left Lila. "You see, little gardener, I have a problem with girls who don't understand boundaries. Girls who think they can linger where they don't belong. Who think their presence doesn't matter." "Please," Lila whispered. "I was just doing my job." "Your job." Vanessa released her wrist, stepping back with a smile that made Ethan's instincts scream. "Your job is to be invisible, to do your work and disappear. But here you are, making yourself the center of attention, making my fiancé notice you." "I didn't what? Didn't plan this? Didn't wear those pathetic overalls to play the wounded little peasant?" Vanessa's voice rose, all pretense of civility evaporating. "Do you think I'm stupid?" Lila's face flushed red. "No, ma'am, I swear." "You swear?" Vanessa laughed again, the sound turning shrill. She glanced at Ethan. "This is what happens when you're too soft with the help, darling. They forget who signs their paychecks." Ethan's jaw tightened. The ring box in his pocket felt like lead. "Vanessa, that's enough." "Enough?" She whirled on him, eyes blazing. "You want to defend her? This little nothing who can't even follow simple instructions?" "I want you to calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down." The mask cracked completely. Vanessa's face twisted into something ugly, all the carefully maintained beauty collapsing into raw fury. "You have no idea what I see, Ethan, what I notice. The way you looked at her just now, I didn't look at her anyway." "You're a liar." The slap came so fast Lila barely registered it. Vanessa's palm connected with the girl's face, with a crack that echoed off the stone walls. Lila stumbled backward, hand flying to her reddening cheek, eyes wide with shock. Ethan moved without thinking, stepping between them. Vanessa, stop. But Vanessa wasn't stopping. Something had broken loose inside her, something dark and jealous and completely unhinged. She shoved past Ethan with surprising force, bearing down on Lila, who'd fallen to her knees in the dirt. "You think you're special?" Vanessa hissed, looming over the cowering girl. "You think this is some fairy tale where the prince saves the servant?" "I don't think anything," Lila choked out, tears streaming down her face. "Please just let me go." "Let you go? After you ruined my night? After you made a fool of me?" Ethan grabbed Vanessa's arm. "That's enough." She yanked free, whirling on him with wild eyes. "You're protecting her. You're actually protecting this piece of trash over me." "I'm protecting common decency." "Decency?" Vanessa's laugh bordered on hysteria. "From a man who's killed more people than I can count. From the butcher of Brooklyn? You want to lecture me about decency?" The old nickname hit like a punch. Ethan's face went cold, all emotion bleeding out into the mask he wore for business. "Watch yourself." "Or what? You'll do to me what you did to the Romano family? What you did to those politicians who tried to regulate your territory?" She stepped closer, fearless in her rage. "I know who you are, Ethan. I know what you are, and this—" She gestured wildly at Lila, still kneeling in the dirt. "This pathetic display of mercy? It's weakness." Something snapped in the garden. Not a sound, a feeling, like the moment before lightning strikes. Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. "Get in the house. Make me." They stood there, locked in a battle of wills, while Lila trembled on the ground between them. The sun continued its descent, shadows lengthening across the roses. Somewhere in the distance, a door slammed. Then Vanessa smiled, a terrible, victorious smile. "You know what?" She turned back to Lila. "I think our little gardener needs to learn a lesson about interrupting important moments." Before Ethan could react, Vanessa grabbed the bucket of mud sitting next to the fertilizer bag. It was heavy, filled with the thick, dark soil they used for the rose beds, mixed with water into a viscous sludge. "Vanessa, don't!" But she was already lifting it, already swinging it in a wide arc, already dumping the entire contents over Lila's head. The mud hit with a wet slapping sound. Lila gasped, choking on the sludge that coated her face, her hair, her shoulders. It dripped down her overalls, thick and black, transforming her into something barely human. She couldn't even scream, just knelt there, shaking, covered in filth. Vanessa dropped the empty bucket. It clanged against the stone path. "There," she said, breathing hard. "That's where you belong. In the dirt, with the worms." Silence. Ethan stared at the scene before him, at Vanessa, chest heaving with righteous fury, at Lila, a statue of mud and misery, and felt something fundamental shift inside his chest. He'd watched men beg for their lives before pulling the trigger. He'd ordered executions without losing sleep. He'd built an empire on blood and fear and the absolute certainty that power justified any action. But this wasn't power. This was cruelty for cruelty's sake. This was what happened when you mistook control for strength, when you confused dominance with worth. Lila wasn't looking at him. She kept her eyes down, mud dripping from her hair, body racked with silent sobs. Broken. Humiliated. Destroyed for the crime of existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Vanessa, beautiful, strategic, perfect Vanessa, stood there expecting praise, expecting him to laugh, to congratulate her on putting the help in their place. The ring box in his pocket had never felt heavier. "Ethan?" Vanessa's voice turned uncertain. "Say something." He couldn't. Not yet. His hand moved to his pocket, fingers closing around the velvet box. He pulled it out slowly, watching Vanessa's face transform, uncertainty melting into anticipation, into triumph, into the absolute certainty that she'd won. She thought this was it. The proposal. The culmination of months of planning, of strategic dinners and carefully orchestrated public appearances. She thought the violence had been foreplay to power. Ethan opened the box. The diamond caught the last rays of sunlight, throwing rainbows across the blood-red roses. Vanessa's breath caught. "Ethan." He looked at the ring. 3 carats, princess cut. Worth $250,000 and the alliance of two crime families. Then he looked at Lila, still kneeling in the mud, still shaking, still unable to meet anyone's eyes. And he made a choice that would haunt him forever. He snapped the box shut. The click echoed like a gunshot. Vanessa's smile froze. "What are you doing?" Ethan stepped past her, moving toward Lila with purpose. Vanessa grabbed his arm, nails digging through his suit jacket. "Ethan, what the hell are you doing?" He pulled free without looking back. 3 more steps brought him to Lila. He knelt, not in the mud, but on the stone path beside it, and reached out. Lila flinched. "It's okay," he heard himself say. "I'm not going to hurt you." She finally looked up, honey eyes swimming with tears and confusion and bone-deep terror. "Please," she whispered. "I just want to go home." "I know." He shrugged out of his suit jacket, the one he'd had tailored in Milan worth $5,000, and draped it over her muddy shoulders. "Come on, let's get you cleaned up." Behind him, Vanessa made a sound like a wounded animal. "Are you insane?" She was screaming now, all composure shattered. "You're choosing her? This nobody? This piece of garbage?" Ethan helped Lila to her feet, steadying her when she stumbled. She was so small under his jacket, drowning in expensive fabric, still covered in mud, but standing now. Standing. He turned to face Vanessa and his voice came out cold enough to freeze blood. "The engagement is off." The garden exploded. Vanessa lunged at him, nails aimed for his eyes, screaming obscenities that would have made hardened criminals blush. Ethan caught her wrists, holding her back as she thrashed and spat and cursed his name. "You'll regret this," she shrieked. "My father will bury you, will take everything you have, everyone you love. You're dead, Ethan Cross. You're a dead man." Footsteps pounded on the path. Marcus appeared, flanked by 2 other security guards, all of them moving with practiced efficiency. "Boss?" Marcus assessed the situation in a glance. Ethan holding back a screaming Vanessa, a mud-covered girl trembling behind him, rose petals scattered across the ground like blood. "Escort Miss Cole off the property," Ethan said calmly. "Use whatever force is necessary." "You can't do this!" Vanessa fought against the guards as they grabbed her arms. "We had a deal. Our families had a deal. The deal's dead. I'll destroy you. I'll tell everyone what you really are, what you've done." Marcus and the guards were already pulling her away, her screams fading as they dragged her back toward the house. She fought every step, hurling threats and promises of vengeance that echoed off the stone walls. Then she was gone. The garden fell silent except for the fountain and the birds and Lila's ragged breathing. Ethan turned back to find her staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. Fear, yes. Confusion, absolutely. But underneath, something that might have been hope. "Why?" she whispered. It was a good question, one he'd be asking himself for a long time. "Because," he said finally, "what she did was wrong. You're a mafia boss. You've done worse." He almost laughed. Almost. "Probably, but not tonight." Lila swayed on her feet. Shock was setting in, he realized. The adrenaline that had kept her upright was fading, leaving her hollow and exhausted. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you inside. We'll clean you up, get you some food, and then—" "Then what?" Her voice cracked. "You'll kill me too, once you realize what you've done? What this will cost you?" The question hung in the air, heavy and real. Ethan thought about the Cole family, about the alliance he'd just destroyed, about the wars that would follow, the bloodshed, the calculated revenge, about everything he'd worked for, burning to ash because he couldn't stand watching an innocent girl humiliated in his garden. He thought about his father, who'd taught him that power came from absolute ruthlessness, his grandfather, who'd killed his own brother to secure control of the family business. 3 generations of crossmen who'd understood that mercy was weakness, that compassion was a luxury they couldn't afford. All of them would have laughed at what he'd just done. All of them would have called him soft, stupid, suicidal. Maybe they were right. "No," he said. "I'm not going to kill you." Then what? He looked at this girl, this stranger who'd somehow become the catalyst for everything unraveling, and realized he didn't have an answer. Not yet. Not while his entire world was crashing down around him and Vanessa's screams still echoed in his memory. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we'll figure it out." It wasn't much of a promise. It wasn't strategic or calculated or even particularly smart. But as he led Lila Hayes toward his mansion, mud still dripping from her hair, his expensive jacket wrapped around her shoulders, Ethan Cross understood one thing with absolute clarity. He just traded his empire for a girl covered in mud. And somehow, impossibly, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Not yet. The sun set behind them, painting the sky the color of fresh wounds. In the distance, a car engine roared to life as Vanessa Cole was driven off the estate, her threats fading into the evening air. Tomorrow, the war would begin. Tonight, Ethan had a gardener to save. And in the back of his mind, a question whispered that he couldn't quite silence. What the hell had he just done? The mansion's interior felt different now, less like a fortress and more like a cage. Ethan's footsteps echoed through the marble hallway as he guided Lila past ancestral portraits whose painted eyes seemed to judge every movement. She walked like someone expecting the floor to collapse beneath her feet, one hand clutching his jacket closed while the other left muddy fingerprints on the pristine wall she used for balance. Marcus appeared at the end of the corridor, his face carefully neutral. 20 years of working for the Cross family had taught him when to ask questions and when to simply execute orders. This was clearly the latter. Boss, Miss Cole has been removed from the premises. She made several threats regarding I don't care. Ethan's voice cut through the report like a blade. What's the status of the house? Kitchen staff dismissed as ordered. Housekeeping gone for the evening. Just security on the grounds. Marcus's eyes flicked to Lila, taking in her mud-covered state, and something that might have been concern crossed his weathered features. Should I call the medical team? Not injured, just shaken. Ethan paused at the base of the grand staircase. Prepare the East Wing guest suite. Clean clothes, toiletries, whatever she needs. And Marcus? Discretion. Always, boss. As Marcus disappeared down a side hallway, Lila finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. This is insane. Probably. You don't even know me. No? Then why? She stopped walking, forcing him to turn and face her. Mud flaked from her hair as she moved, leaving a trail on his imported Italian tile. Why would you throw away everything for someone you don't know? Ethan studied her face, really looked at it for the first time beneath the layers of dirt. High cheekbones, a small scar above her left eyebrow, eyes that held intelligence despite the fear. She wasn't asking out of gratitude. She was asking because she genuinely couldn't comprehend the logic. That made two of them. Because what she did was wrong, he said finally. You've built an empire on wrong. How do you know what I've built? A bitter smile touched her lips. Everyone knows who Ethan Cross is. We might work in your gardens, but we're not deaf. The Butcher of Brooklyn doesn't exactly keep a low profile. The nickname again. He'd earned it 5 years ago during the territory wars with the Romano family. 3 days of bloodshed that left 18 men dead and the Romanos begging for mercy. The newspapers had loved it. The other families had learned from it. That was business, he said. And this? What is this? He didn't have an answer, so he started climbing the stairs. After a moment's hesitation, Lila followed. The East Wing was his mother's domain before she died. Rooms decorated in soft creams and golds, untouched for 7 years because Ethan couldn't bring himself to change them. He led Lila through a sitting room filled with antique furniture and into the master bedroom where a 4-poster bed dominated the space. Bathroom's through there. He gestured to a carved door. Take your time. Marcus will bring clothes. Lila stood in the center of the room, looking utterly lost. I don't understand what's happening. You and me both. Your fiancé, ex-fiancé, is going to start a war over this. You know that, right? The Cole family doesn't forgive insults. Ethan moved to the window, looking out over the darkening grounds. Lights were coming on across the estate, illuminating the gardens where his entire life had just imploded. Let them come. Just like that? You're willing to fight a war because someone was cruel to a gardener? He turned back to face her, and something in his expression must have shown because Lila took an involuntary step backward. I've fought wars for less, he said quietly. Territory, money, reputation. I've killed men over perceived slights and business disagreements. But tonight, he stopped, searching for words that made sense even to himself. Tonight I watched someone I was planning to marry torture an innocent person for entertainment. And I realized that if I gave her that ring, if I tied myself to that kind of casual cruelty, I'd become something I'm not sure I could live with. You've killed people. In business, in war, never for fun. The distinction felt important, even if he couldn't fully articulate why. There's a difference between necessary violence and enjoying someone's pain. Lila wrapped her arms around herself, mud cracking on her sleeves. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? A monster. Give it time. He moved toward the door. Marcus will bring clothes. Lock the door after me if it makes you feel safer. Will it? Make me safer? The question stopped him cold. She was asking if he was a threat. If this entire display of mercy was some elaborate game, if she was trading one nightmare for another. Yes, he said, and meant it. You're safe here. From me, from Vanessa, from anyone who might come looking. I give you my word. And your word means something? In my world, it means everything. He pulled open the door. Get cleaned up. We'll talk more after. He was halfway through the sitting room when her voice called out. Mr. Cross? Ethan? A pause. Ethan. Thank you. He nodded without turning around and left before she could see his face, because the truth was, he had no idea if he was saving her or if he just painted a target on both their backs. The study was his sanctuary, dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a desk that had belonged to his grandfather. Ethan poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and dropped into the leather chair that had cradled 3 generations of cross-patriarchs while they made decisions that shaped the city's underworld. His phone had been buzzing non-stop since Marcus escorted Vanessa out. He finally looked at the screen. 17 missed calls from Vincent Cole, Vanessa's father. 23 text messages from various associates, all asking if the rumors were true. 6 voicemails he didn't need to listen to because he could guess their content. And 1 message from his attorney, "We need to talk, tonight." Ethan tossed the phone onto the desk and took a long drink. The whiskey burned going down, but it didn't come close to matching the burn in his chest. A soft knock on the door. "Come in." Marcus entered, carrying a tablet. His expression was grim. "You're going to want to see this." Ethan took the device. The screen showed security footage from the front gate, timestamp 43 minutes ago. Vanessa's car peeling out, tires smoking. But it was the next clip that made his jaw tighten. Vincent Cole's convoy. 3 black SUVs pulling up to the gate, currently idling on the street just beyond the property line. Not entering, not leaving, just waiting. "How many men?" Ethan asked. "At least 15 that we can see. Probably more in reserve." "Armed?" "We have to assume yes." Ethan studied the footage, reading the situation like he'd been trained to since childhood. Vincent wasn't attacking. Not yet. This was a statement, a show of force, a reminder that the Cole family didn't take insults lightly. "Have our people ready," Ethan said, "but nobody fires unless fired upon. This stays cold until Vincent decides otherwise." "Understood." Marcus hesitated. "Boss, the girl, Lila." "Lila? Is she worth this?" The Cole Alliance represented— I know what it represented. Ethan set down the tablet. "Tell me something, Marcus. In 20 years, have I ever made a decision based on emotion? No, sir. Have I ever acted without calculating the costs? Never. Then trust that I know what I'm doing." Marcus held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll have the men ready." After he left, Ethan leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. The truth was, he had no idea what he was doing. Every instinct he'd honed over 15 years of running the family business was screaming that he'd made a catastrophic mistake, that he'd traded strategic advantage for a moment of conscience, that his father would have put a bullet in his head for such weakness. But when he thought about walking away, about letting Vanessa humiliate Lila while he stood there and did nothing, something in his chest constricted. Some line he hadn't known existed until it was crossed. His phone rang. Not Vincent Cole. Worse. "Antonio," Ethan answered. Antonio Castellano controlled the Northern Territories and had been the Cross family's most reliable ally for a decade. His gravelly voice came through rough with concern. "Tell me the rumors aren't true." Depends on the rumor. That you humiliated Vincent Cole's daughter in front of your staff. That you threw away the biggest alliance since the Moretti merger. That you've lost your mind over some... He paused, clearly choosing his words carefully. Civilian. Ethan swirled the whiskey in his glass. The engagement's off. Everything else is speculation. The engagement that was supposed to unite the Eastern Territories. The engagement that was going to make you the most powerful family in the state. Antonio's voice rose. What the hell happened? She crossed a line. Vanessa? So what? Women like her have temperaments. You manage it. You don't blow up your entire future over it. It wasn't about her temperament. Then what? How could he explain it? How could he make Antonio understand that watching Vanessa dump mud on a terrified girl had shown him exactly who he'd be marrying? That he'd seen his future in her eyes, cold, cruel, taking pleasure in others' pain, and couldn't stomach it. She hurt someone innocent, Ethan said finally, for no reason except that she could. Silence on the line. Then Antonio laughed, but it held no humor. You're kidding. You destroyed the Cole alliance because of hurt feelings? Because of what it revealed about her character. Character. Antonio's voice turned hard. Ethan, we're not Boy Scouts. We're criminals. We've done things that would make Vanessa's little tantrum look like a playground spat. When did character start mattering? It was a fair question, one Ethan had been asking himself. I don't know, he admitted, but it does. Then you're a fool. Antonio's disappointment was palpable. Vincent Cole is going to come for you. And when he does, don't expect the other families to have your back. Not over this. The line went dead. Ethan stared at the phone, then threw it against the wall. It shattered with a satisfying crack, pieces raining down onto the Persian rug. A soft gasp from the doorway. Lila stood there, transformed. She wore one of Marcus's emergency stash outfits, simple jeans and a white t-shirt that hung loose on her small frame. Her hair was clean, pulled back in a wet braid, revealing the full extent of the bruise blooming on her cheek where Vanessa had slapped her. She looked young, vulnerable, and completely out of place in his world of violence and calculated cruelty. Sorry, she said. I heard the crash. I thought, it's fine. He stood, suddenly aware of how his loss of control must look. Just a phone. How are you feeling? Like I fell into someone else's life? She stepped into the study, eyes sweeping over the books, the antique furniture, the broken phone pieces. That was about me, wasn't it? The call. Indirectly. What did they say? Ethan considered lying, softening the truth, but she deserved honesty. That I'm a fool. That the Cole family will retaliate. That I should have managed Vanessa's temperament instead of throwing away strategic advantage. Lila wrapped her arms around herself. They're right, aren't they? This is going to destroy you. Maybe. Then why? Really why? She moved closer, and he could smell the mansion's expensive soap on her skin. Nobody sacrifices empire for a stranger. Nobody with your reputation, your history, suddenly develops a conscience over a gardener. So what is this really about? The question hit harder than Antonio's criticism. She was right. It didn't make sense. Nothing about tonight made sense. Ethan Cross, who'd built his reputation on ruthless calculation, had just burned everything on impulse. My mother, he heard himself say. She was a gardener before she married my father. Lila's eyes widened. What? Worked at a flower shop in Brooklyn. That's where they met. My father saw her arranging roses and decided he had to have her. Ethan moved to the window, watching Vincent's convoy still waiting at the gate. She was kind, gentle. Everything the Cross family wasn't. And for a while she softened my father, made him believe there could be something more than violence and power. What happened to her? She died when I was 15. Brain aneurysm. One day she was humming in the garden. His throat tightened. The next day she was gone, and my father went with her. Not literally, but the man who'd learned to be gentle, who'd tried to be better for her. He died too. What came back was pure Cross, pure ruthlessness. He turned to find Lila watching him with an expression that might have been understanding. I was humming, she said softly, in the garden. That's what made you notice me. The same song my mother used to sing. And Vanessa. looked exactly like what the Cross family produces, what I'm supposed to be. He met her eyes. When I saw you kneeling there, covered in mud, terrified and humiliated, I had a choice. I could be the man my father became after my mother died, or I could try to be something else. That's a lot of weight to put on a stranger. I know. I'm sorry. Lila moved to the desk, picking up one of the broken phone pieces. Your friend Antonio was right, though. I'm going to get you killed. Possibly. You're very calm about that. I've been expecting someone to kill me since I took over the family business. At least this way, it'll be for something that meant something. She set down the phone piece and looked at him with those honey-colored eyes that had somehow upended his entire world. I could leave. Right now. Walk out the gate, disappear, and you could call Vanessa. Tell her it was temporary insanity. That you're sorry. Maybe salvage? No. Why not? Because then Vanessa wins. And more importantly, it would prove that everyone's right. That I am just the butcher of Brooklyn. That there's nothing else in here. He tapped his chest. My mother believed people could change. That even someone born into violence could choose differently. Maybe she was wrong. But I'd like to find out before Vincent Cole puts a bullet in my head. Lila laughed, a short, sharp sound that held more pain than humor. This is insane. Yes. We're both going to die. Possibly. And you're okay with that? Ethan considered the question. Was he okay with dying for a stranger? For a moment of conscience? For the ghost of his mother's memory and the faint hope that he could be something more than his bloodline demanded? Ask me tomorrow, he said finally. A sharp knock interrupted them. Marcus entered without waiting for permission, his face tight with urgency. We have a problem. Of course they did. Vincent? Ethan asked. At the gate. Alone. Says he wants to talk. Lila's face went pale. It's a trap. Definitely, Marcus agreed. Ethan straightened his shoulders, slipping back into the cold mask he wore for business. Let him in. Show him to the receiving room. And Marcus? Full security sweep. If he's wired or armed, I want to know. After Marcus left, Lila grabbed Ethan's arm. You can't meet with him. Not tonight. Not while everything's so raw. If I refuse, it's a declaration of war. This way, there's a chance for diplomacy. A diplomacy? His daughter is probably still screaming threats in the car. Which is why he came alone. Ethan gently removed her hand from his arm, though the touch had been oddly grounding. Vincent's smart. He knows I didn't do this lightly. He wants to understand before he burns everything down. Or he wants to kill you face to face. That too. He moved toward the door. Stay here. Lock it after I leave. Don't come out until I come back. And if you don't come back? Then Marcus will get you somewhere safe. Her hand found his again, squeezing tight. For what it's worth, your mother would be proud. The words hit harder than any threat Vincent could level. Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice, and left before he could do something stupid like ask her to run away with him. The receiving room was where the Cross family conducted official business. Neutral territory within the mansion, decorated formally with uncomfortable chairs deliberately chosen to discourage long visits. Vincent Cole sat in one of them, looking every inch the patriarch of a crime family. Silver hair, sharp suit, eyes that had seen everything and been surprised by nothing. Until tonight. Ethan. Vincent's voice carried the weight of 30 years controlling the eastern seaboard. Interesting evening. I've had worse. Ethan took the chair across from him, maintaining careful distance. Drink? This isn't a social call. No, but it's civilized so far. Let's keep it that way. Vincent studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Ethan poured 2 glasses of whiskey from the sidebar, noting that Marcus and 2 other guards stood strategically positioned by the exits. Insurance. My daughter is hysterical, Vincent said after taking a sip. Claims you humiliated her in front of staff. Chose a gardener over her. Called off an engagement that took 6 months to negotiate. All true. Care to explain why? This was the moment. Ethan could spin it, make it about business or strategy or anything except the truth. Vincent would probably accept a reasonable lie. But sitting across from this man who'd built an empire on deception, Ethan found himself tired of calculated words. Because she dumped a bucket of mud on a terrified girl for entertainment, he said simply. And I couldn't stomach the idea of marrying someone who took pleasure in cruelty. Vincent's eyebrows rose. That's it? That's your reason? Yes. You've done worse? We both have. In business, never for fun. And you think that distinction matters? I think it's the only thing that matters. Vincent set down his glass with deliberate care. My daughter is many things. Ambitious, sharp, sometimes vindictive. But she's valuable. She would have made you the most powerful family in the state. At what cost? Cost? Vincent laughed, but it held an edge. You're in the business of costs, Ethan. You calculate them every day. So let me lay out what tonight cost you. The Coal Alliance? Gone. The Eastern Territories? Contested. Your reputation as a rational actor? Damaged. Antonio Castellano just called me to discuss new arrangements. The Moretti family smells blood. And for what? A girl you don't know? Yes. The single word hung in the air like a challenge. Vincent leaned forward. I came here tonight prepared to kill you. Not metaphorically. I have men positioned around this property who could turn this mansion into a tomb. One word from me and the Cross family ends tonight. Ethan didn't flinch. Then say the word. You'd die for her? This gardener? I'd die standing by a decision that felt right for the first time in 15 years. They stared at each other across the glass table, two men who'd built empires on violence and calculation, now facing off over something that defied both. Then Vincent did something Ethan didn't expect. He smiled. You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the stupidest. Probably both. My daughter will never forgive this insult. I know. She'll spend the rest of her life trying to destroy you. I'm counting on it. Vincent stood, and the guards tensed, but he just moved to the window, looking out at the darkened grounds. You know what's funny? I told Vanessa not to marry you. Told her you were too much like your father, too cold, too calculating to ever really love anyone. Looks like I was wrong. I don't love the girl. I don't even know her. No, but you love the idea of being better than what you were raised to be. Vincent turned back. That's more dangerous than love. That's idealism. And idealism in our world gets people killed. So kill me. I should. Vincent moved toward the door, pausing beside Ethan's chair. But I won't. Not tonight. Not over this. Because as much as I love my daughter, I know what she is and what she did tonight. He shook his head. She deserved what you gave her. Ethan stood slowly. You're letting this go? Hell no. Vanessa will demand blood, and I'll give her what she wants. But it won't be tonight. Tonight, I'm giving you a gift. Vincent's smile turned sharp. Time to regret your decision. Time to realize what you've sacrificed. Time to understand that being better doesn't make you safer. How much time? 2 weeks. Then the gloves come off. He opened the door, then looked back. One more thing. That gardener you saved, the Cole family has a long memory. She'll never be safe, not from Vanessa, not from associates looking to curry favor, not from anyone who thinks her death might hurt you. So ask yourself, did you save her tonight, or did you just give her a death sentence? The question followed Vincent out the door, down the hallway, and into the night where his convoy waited. Marcus appeared at Ethan's shoulder. Orders? Fortify the estate. I want 24-hour security on every entrance, background checks on every staff member, and get me everything there is to know about Lila Hayes. Already started. Boss, Vincent's right. The girl's a liability now. Then we protect her. For how long? 2 weeks? 2 months? The rest of her life? Ethan didn't have an answer. He climbed the stairs back to the east wing, each step heavier than the last. Vincent's words echoed in his head. Did you save her or give her a death sentence? Lila was exactly where he'd left her, sitting on the edge of the bed, looking small and lost in clothes that didn't fit. She stood when he entered, searching his face. You're alive. Disappointed? Terrified. She moved closer. What did he say? Ethan told her everything. Vincent's threats, the 2-week deadline, Vanessa's promised revenge. He didn't soften it or hide the danger. She deserved to know what he dragged her into. When he finished, Lila was quiet for a long moment. I should leave, she said finally. Tonight, before this gets worse. Where would you go? I don't know. Somewhere far. Somewhere they can't find me. There is no such place. Not from the Cole family. Then what do you suggest? Ethan looked at this girl who'd stumbled into his life by accident and upended everything. He thought about his mother's gentle hands in the garden, about the man his father had been before grief calcified his heart, about the choice between being the butcher of Brooklyn or something, anything, else. I suggest we make them regret starting this war. Lila's eyes widened. You want to fight them? I want to survive them. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, fighting Vincent Cole is suicide. Probably. But so is running. So is hiding. At least this way we control the terms. She studied him for a long moment, then laughed, that same bitter sound from earlier. You're insane. We've established that. I'm a gardener. I don't know anything about mob wars or family vendettas, or you know how to survive. That's more valuable than you think. Is it? She turned away, arms wrapped tight around herself. Because right now, I feel like I'm drowning. Ethan understood that feeling. He'd been drowning since the moment he snapped that ring box shut, but drowning together felt better than drowning alone. 2 weeks, he said. Vincent gave us 2 weeks. We used that time to prepare, to turn this mansion into a fortress, to make ourselves into something the Cole family can't easily break. And then? Then we see if being better is worth dying for. Lila turned back to face him, and in her eyes he saw the same desperate hope he felt burning in his own chest. The hope that maybe, just maybe, they could survive this. That his impulsive choice in the garden wasn't the end of both their stories, but the beginning of something neither could have predicted. Okay, she whispered. 2 weeks. It wasn't much, but it was something. Ethan left her in the East Wing and returned to his study, where the broken phone pieces still littered the floor. He had 2 weeks to prepare for war. 2 weeks to protect someone he barely knew. 2 weeks to prove that his mother's belief in redemption wasn't just wishful thinking. Outside, Vincent's convoy finally pulled away from the gate, taillights disappearing into the night. The war was coming, and Ethan Cross had never felt less prepared in his life. Morning arrived with the weight of consequence. Ethan hadn't slept. Instead, he'd spent the night in his study reviewing security protocols, financial assets, and every piece of leverage he had against the Cole family. The sun rose over the estate like an interrogation lamp, harsh and unforgiving, illuminating exactly how exposed he'd made himself. Marcus appeared at 6 with coffee and a folder thick enough to be a murder weapon. Background on Lila Hayes, he said, dropping it onto the desk. You're not going to like it. Ethan opened the file. The first page showed a driver's license photo. Lila's honey eyes staring at the camera with the nervous smile of someone who'd never expected their life to matter to anyone important. Born in a small town in Georgia, moved to the city 3 years ago. No criminal record, no family connections, no protection. She's nobody, Marcus said flatly, which makes her the perfect target. Ethan flipped through the pages. Employment history at Greenscape Gardens for 2 years. Before that, a series of minimum wage jobs, waitress, retail clerk, dog walker. A studio apartment in a neighborhood that made Marcus's security team wince. Student loans she'd never finish paying. A mother in a nursing home whose medical bills were drowning her. She works 3 jobs, Marcus continued. Gardens during the day, waitresses 4 nights a week, and does weekend shifts at a bookstore. Sends every spare dollar to her mother's care facility. He paused. She's broke, boss. 1 missed paycheck from homeless. Ethan studied a photo of Lila at work, kneeling in someone's garden, dirt on her hands and that same soft smile. She looked so ordinary, so fragile, so completely unprepared for what he'd dragged her into. The Cole family will eat her alive, Marcus said quietly. Not if we protect her. For how long? Vincent gave you 2 weeks, but Vanessa? She'll make this personal. This won't end until one of you is dead. Ethan closed the folder. Then we make sure it's not us. A knock at the door interrupted them. One of the guards stuck his head in, looking uncomfortable. Boss, the girl's awake. She's asking about leaving. Of course she was. In daylight, with adrenaline faded and reality setting in, the smart move was to run. Ethan couldn't blame her for wanting to try. He found Lila in the kitchen, dressed in the same borrowed clothes, staring at a cup of coffee like it held answers. She looked up when he entered, and the bruise on her cheek had darkened overnight, a purple shadow of Vanessa's fury. "I need to go home," she said without preamble. "Get some things. Check on my neighbor's cat. Call my boss at Greenscape and explain why I didn't show up for work yesterday." "You can't go home." "Excuse me?" Ethan pulled out a chair across from her. "Vanessa knows who you are now. By this afternoon, she'll know where you live, where you work, everyone you've ever spoken to. Your apartment isn't safe." Lila's hands tightened around the coffee cup. "So what? I'm a prisoner here?" "You're protected here." "Same thing." "Not remotely." He leaned forward. "Look, I know this isn't what you signed up for. You were just doing your job, and now you're caught in something that could get you killed. If you want out, I'll arrange it. New identity, money to relocate, protection during the transition. But you have to understand, once you leave this estate, I can't guarantee your safety." She studied him with those eyes that seemed to see through every calculation. "And if I stay? Then we prepare for war, together." "I don't know how to fight a war." "Neither did I at first." "You learn." He gestured around the kitchen, the mansion, the life he'd built on violence. "This world? It's not complicated. You figure out what matters and you protect it with everything you have. The rest is just details." Lila laughed, sharp and humorless. "And I matter now? A gardener you've known for 12 hours? You matter because Vanessa made you matter. Because walking away would prove that mercy is weakness and cruelty wins. Because—" He stopped, searching for words that didn't sound insane. "Because my mother used to say that how we treat the powerless defines who we really are, and I'd like to believe she was right." Something shifted in Lila's expression. Not trust exactly, but a willingness to consider trust. "Your mother sounds like she was a good person." "She was. Better than this family deserved." "And you? Are you a good person, Ethan Cross?" The question hung between them like a blade. Ethan thought about the men he'd killed, the families he'd destroyed, the empire built on fear and blood. Good wasn't a word anyone associated with his name. "No," he said honestly. "But maybe I could be less bad. That's something." Lila set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. "Okay. Okay? I'll stay, for now, until we figure out what comes next." She met his eyes. "But I have conditions." Ethan almost smiled. Even terrified and trapped, she was negotiating. "I'm listening." "First, I'm not a prisoner. I need to be able to move around, make decisions, not feel like a bird in a cage." "Agreed within reason. You go nowhere without security." "Second, I want to know everything. No secrets about what's happening, what threats are coming, what you're planning. If I'm risking my life, I deserve to know why." "Fair." "And third," she hesitated, then pushed forward, "I want to help. Not just hide behind guards and let you fight my battles. If there's something I can do, some way I can be useful, I want to try." This surprised him. Most people in her position would want to stay as far from danger as possible. "Why?" "Because I've spent my entire life being invisible. Working jobs where nobody remembers my name, living in an apartment where nobody knocks on my door, sending money to a mother who doesn't recognize me anymore." Her voice cracked slightly. "Yesterday, someone noticed me. It nearly got me killed, but for the first time in 3 years, I mattered to someone. I'm not ready to go back to invisible." Ethan understood that feeling more than she knew. The crushing weight of being born into a role, playing a part, never quite being seen as human beneath the reputation. "All right," he said. "Partners." She extended her hand across the table. He shook it, noting the calluses from garden work, the surprising strength in her grip. "Now what?" Lila asked. "Now we turn you into someone the Cole family can't easily destroy." The transformation started immediately. Marcus assembled a team, ex-military, loyal to the Cross family, trained in protection details that had kept Ethan alive through 3 assassination attempts and 2 full-scale wars. They surrounded Lila like a living fortress, teaching her to move through the mansion's hallways with awareness, to recognize threats, to understand the geography of safety. But physical security was only part of it. She needs to understand the world she's in, Marcus told Ethan that afternoon. Who the players are, what the rules mean, how to read situations before they explode. So Ethan became her teacher, sitting across from her in his study while guards patrolled outside. There are 5 major families in this city, he explained, spreading a map across the desk. Cross, Cole, Moretti, Castellano, and Zhang. We each control different territories, different revenue streams. The peace between us is maintained through a balance of power and mutual benefit. Lila studied the map, tracing boundaries with her finger. And you just blew up that balance. Spectacularly. Walk me through it. What happens now? Ethan pulled out a whiteboard, the same one he used to plan operations, and started mapping consequences. Vincent Cole controls the Eastern Territories. Pharmaceutical distribution, both legal and black market. The engagement to Vanessa was supposed to merge our operations, giving us a monopoly on the entire supply chain. But now? Now he's angry, his daughter's humiliated, and the other families smell opportunity. Antonio Castellano will try to poach Cole's business. The Moretti family might make a play for disputed territories. And Vanessa, he wrote her name in red. She's the wild card. Vincent will pursue strategic revenge. Vanessa will want blood. Lila absorbed this, her face pale but focused. So we're not just fighting the Coles, we're fighting everyone. Welcome to the family business. How do we win? We don't. We survive long enough to make fighting us too expensive to be worth it. She looked at him like he'd lost his mind. That's your plan? Survival? That's always the plan. Everything else is just tactics. Over the next 3 days, the mansion transformed into a war room. Ethan's associates came and went, lawyers reviewing contracts, accountants moving money into protected accounts, soldiers reporting on Cole family movements. Lila sat in on every meeting, initially quiet and overwhelmed, but gradually asking questions that showed she understood more than anyone expected. Why don't you just pay them off? She asked during a strategy session on day 4. Offer Vincent something he wants more than revenge? The room went silent. Marcus and the other lieutenants stared at her like she'd suggested they surrender. But Ethan considered it. What would we offer? I don't know. Territory, money? Well, whatever he was going to get from the marriage, give it to him anyway. Doesn't work like that, Marcus said. This isn't about business anymore. It's about respect. Ethan humiliated his daughter. No amount of money fixes that. Then make it about business again, Lila pressed. Find something he needs more than pride. Everyone has pressure points. Ethan looked at her with new appreciation. She was thinking like a strategist, finding angles that his years of conditioning had made him overlook. She's not wrong, he said slowly. Vincent's smart. He knows a war costs money. If we can show him a path to profit that doesn't require destroying us, he'll take it, Marcus finished. Maybe. It's risky. Everything's risky now. They spent the afternoon researching Vincent Cole's current vulnerabilities. Turns out, the pharmaceutical empire wasn't as stable as it appeared. Federal investigations were circling his legitimate businesses. A rival family had been undercutting his prices in the black market. And Vanessa's younger brother, Michael Cole, was making noise about taking over the family business. Michael's been pushing Vincent to retire, one of Ethan's intelligence people reported. Thinks the old man's losing his edge. Vincent's been fighting it, but the family's divided. Lila leaned forward. So Vincent's dealing with threats from outside and inside. He doesn't need another war. But his daughter's demanding one, Ethan countered. Then we give him a way to satisfy Vanessa without destroying himself. Everyone stared at her. How? Marcus asked. Lila stood, moving to the whiteboard. She took the marker from Ethan's hand and started writing. What if Vanessa's anger isn't really about me? What if it's about control? Explain, Ethan said. Explain. Ethan. She was marrying you for power, right? To secure her position in the family, to prove she could deliver strategic wins. I humiliated her, but more importantly, I cost her that victory. So give her a different victory. Such as? Lila circled Michael Cole's name on the board. Vincent's worried about his son taking over. Vanessa wants to prove she's valuable. What if we help her neutralize Michael? Give her information, leverage, something she can use to secure her position without going to war with you? The room erupted in arguments. Too risky, too complicated. The Coles would never trust information from Ethan. It could backfire and make everything worse. But Ethan studied the board, seeing the potential. It was insane. It was brilliant. It was exactly the kind of lateral thinking that could save them. It might work, he said quietly. Marcus grabbed his arm. Boss, you can't seriously be considering this. Working with Vanessa? After what she did? Not working with her. Using her. There's a difference. It's still insane. Everything about this situation is insane. Ethan turned to Lila. You really think we can redirect her anger? I think angry people want to feel powerful. If we give Vanessa a way to reclaim power that doesn't involve killing us, she might take it. Maybe. Maybe. It wasn't much, but it was more than they'd had an hour ago. That night, Ethan sent out feelers through neutral intermediaries. Carefully worded messages suggesting that certain information about Michael Cole's activities might be available to interested parties. No direct contact with Vanessa. No obvious fingerprints. Just breadcrumbs leading to a bigger prize than revenge. While they waited for responses, life in the mansion developed in strange rhythm. Mornings were for security briefings. Afternoons for strategy sessions. Evenings, surprisingly, became something else. Ethan found Lila in the gardens on day 7, kneeling in the same dirt where everything had started. She'd convinced the security team to let her work, and now she moved among the roses with practiced hands, pruning and deadheading like the world wasn't falling apart around them. You miss it, he said, approaching quietly. She didn't look up. The work or the simplicity? Both. Every day. She sat back on her heels, studying a perfect white rose. You know what's funny? A week ago, my biggest worry was whether I could afford both rent and my mother's medication. Now I'm hiding from a crime family and planning corporate espionage. But these roses? They're exactly the same. They don't care about mob politics or revenge. They just want water and sunlight and someone to cut away the dead parts. Ethan knelt beside her, careful not to damage any plants. My mother used to say gardening was meditation, that you couldn't worry about the future while your hands were in the dirt. Was she right? I never understood what she meant until now. He touched one of the roses, feeling the silk-soft petals. Everything in my life is calculated. Every decision measured against cost and benefit. But this, he gestured at the garden. There's no calculation here, just growth or death. Simple. Lila finally looked at him, and her expression was softer than he'd seen since that first night. Do you ever wish you'd chosen differently, a different life? Every day. But wishing doesn't change bloodlines. Maybe not, but choices do. She returned her attention to the roses. You chose to save me. That changed everything. Destroyed everything. Same thing, sometimes. They worked in silence for a while, Lila teaching him the proper way to deadhead roses, how to cut at an angle to encourage new growth. His hands, used to holding guns and signing death warrants, felt clumsy with pruning shears. But there was something peaceful about the work, something that quieted the constant calculations running through his mind. Can I ask you something? Lila said eventually. Anything. Do you regret it? Calling off the engagement? Ethan considered lying. It would be easier to say no, to claim certainty he didn't feel. But Lila had been honest with him. She deserved the same. I regret the consequences, he said carefully. The danger I've put you in, the wars I've started, the stability I've destroyed. But the choice itself? He met her eyes. No, I don't regret that. Even if it kills us? Even then. She held his gaze for a long moment, and something passed between them. Not romance exactly, but recognition. Two people who'd stumbled into each other's lives by accident and found something worth the chaos. The moment broke when Marcus appeared at the garden entrance, his face grim. We got a response, he said. From Vanessa. They reconvened in the study, where Marcus played a recording delivered through an encrypted channel. Vanessa's voice came through cold and precise, nothing like the screaming fury from a week ago. I received your little message about my dear brother, she said. How very thoughtful. But here's the thing, Ethan. I don't negotiate with people who humiliate me. I destroy them. So, here's my counteroffer. You have 1 week, 7 days to make your peace, say your goodbyes, and prepare for the hell I'm about to rain down on everything you love. Starting with your little gardener?" The recording ended. Lila had gone pale. "That's not redirected anger. That's a death threat." "She's bluffing," Marcus said, but he didn't sound convinced. Ethan replayed the message, listening for subtext. Vanessa was angry, but there was something else in her voice. Uncertainty. The fact that she'd responded at all meant she'd considered the offer, which meant Lila's theory had merit. "She's testing us," he said, "seeing if we'll panic, if we'll fold under pressure." "And if we don't?" Lila asked. "Then we push harder." Over the next 2 days, Ethan's team assembled a devastating package of information on Michael Cole. Financial records showing embezzlement. Recorded conversations with the Moretti family about a potential coup. Evidence that Michael had been secretly negotiating to sell out Cole family interests for personal gain. It was damning. It was exactly what Vanessa needed to destroy her brother and secure her position, and it was completely real. They'd spent 48 hours of intensive investigation to verify every detail. "We send this to Vanessa," Ethan told his team. "No strings attached. Just information she can use however she wants." "You're giving her ammunition for free?" Marcus looked incredulous. "What if she uses it against us?" "She won't, because the information proves we're valuable, that we have resources she needs." Ethan looked at Lila, who nodded encouragement. "We're not buying peace, we're selling partnership." The package was delivered through the same encrypted channel. Then they waited. The response came at 3 in the morning on day 12. Ethan's phone rang, not a recorded message, but a direct call from a number he recognized, Vanessa herself. He answered on speaker with Marcus and Lila listening. "That was quite a gift," Vanessa said, her voice carefully neutral. "Very thorough. Very damaging to dear Michael." "Facts usually are." "I suppose you think this changes things between us." "I think it gives you options. What you do with them is your choice." Silence on the line. Ethan could almost hear her calculating, weighing pride against pragmatism. "I'm not calling off the war," she said finally. "You humiliated me in front of your staff. That debt gets paid." "I understand." "But," she paused, "but maybe we can discuss terms. My father believes in scorched earth. I prefer more surgical approaches." It was the opening they needed. Not forgiveness, not friendship, but the possibility of negotiation. "What kind of terms?" Ethan asked. "Meet me. Tomorrow." "Neutral territory, just you and me." "That's a trap." "Probably, but it's also an opportunity, unless you're too afraid." Ethan looked at Lila, who was shaking her head frantically. Marcus's hand had moved to his weapon. Every instinct screamed that walking into a private meeting with Vanessa Cole was suicide, but every instinct had also told him to marry her a week ago, and look how that turned out. "Name the place," he said. Vanessa gave him an address. A restaurant in neutral territory, public enough that open violence would be risky, private enough for real conversation. "Tomorrow, noon. Come alone, and I'll do the same." She hung up. Marcus exploded. "You can't seriously be considering this." "Why not?" "Because she'll kill you, or have you killed, or capture you and make you wish you were dead." "All possibilities," Ethan agreed. "But if there's even a chance to end this without all-out war, I have to try." "It's suicide." "It's strategy." Lila had been quiet through the whole exchange. Now she stood, moving close enough that Ethan could see the fear in her eyes. "He's right," she said quietly. "This is a trap. Vanessa doesn't forgive. She doesn't negotiate. She destroys." "I know." "Then why go?" Ethan touched her face, his thumb gentle on the bruise that had finally started to fade. "Because you were right. Angry people want to feel powerful. If I can give Vanessa power without giving her our lives, this ends. If I don't try, we fight a war we probably can't win." "You could die." "I've been dying since I was born into this family. At least this way it might mean something." Lila grabbed his shirt, pulling him closer. "Don't you dare get noble on me now. We're partners, remember? Which means you don't make decisions like this alone." "Then what do you suggest?" "I suggest you take backup. I suggest you plan for every contingency. I suggest you stop trying to save everyone and remember that you're worth saving too." Her words hit harder than any of Marcus's tactical concerns. Ethan had spent so long calculating everyone else's survival that he'd forgotten his own might matter. "All right," he said. "We do this smart. Full security sweep of the location. Backup teams positioned within response distance. Exit strategies for every scenario. And if anything feels wrong, I abort." "Promise?" "Promise." She released his shirt, stepping back, but her eyes held his with an intensity that made his chest tight. "Come back," she said simply. "I will." It was a promise he had no business making. But looking at Lila Hayes, this gardener who'd accidentally become the center of his universe, Ethan found himself meaning it more than any promise he'd ever made. The next morning arrived too fast. Ethan dressed carefully, bulletproof vest under a tailored suit, weapon at his back, phone programmed with emergency triggers. Marcus positioned teams around the restaurant, invisible but ready. Every contingency planned, every angle covered. But as Ethan walked into that restaurant at noon, seeing Vanessa Cole sitting alone at a corner table, he understood that no amount of planning could protect him from what came next. Some conversations changed everything. This would be one of them. Vanessa Cole sat like a queen in exile, her crimson dress a declaration of war against the neutral beige of the restaurant's interior. She'd chosen a table positioned perfectly, back to the wall, clear sightlines to every entrance, close enough to the kitchen for a quick exit. Ethan recognized the tactical positioning because he'd have done the same thing. He crossed the restaurant floor aware that every eye was on him, that Marcus and his team were watching from strategic positions outside, that one wrong move could turn this lunch into a bloodbath. The other diners, mostly business people on expense accounts, had no idea they were eating beside two people who could order deaths with a phone call. "Ethan." Vanessa's smile was sharp enough to cut. "You came." "You doubted I would?" "I doubted you'd be stupid enough. But then again, you've been making spectacularly stupid decisions lately." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit. I promised you'd leave here alive. I intend to keep that promise." He sat, noting the placement of her hands, visible on the table, no weapons within easy reach. She'd come unarmed, or at least wanted him to think so. The bulletproof vest under his shirt suddenly felt both essential and ridiculous. A waiter appeared, young and nervous, clearly sensing the tension. They ordered, Vanessa a salad she wouldn't eat, Ethan a steak he wouldn't taste. The ritual of ordering gave them both time to measure, to calculate, to prepare for the real conversation. When the waiter left, Vanessa leaned back and studied him like a specimen under glass. "You look terrible," she observed. "Not sleeping?" "Not much." "Guilt or fear?" "Both." This seemed to surprise her. "At least you're honest. Most men in your position would pretend everything's fine, that they're in control." "I stopped pretending the night I threw away your ring." Vanessa's jaw tightened at the reminder. "Yes. Let's talk about that. The night you humiliated me in front of your staff, chose a nobody over me, and blew up 6 months of careful negotiation. I'm sorry you were humiliated. Are you sorry you did it?" Ethan met her eyes, those same eyes that had seemed so perfect a week ago, before he'd seen what lived behind them. "No." The word hung between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Vanessa's laugh was cold. "I have to admire the honesty, at least. Most men would grovel, would claim temporary insanity, would beg for another chance, but you sit there and tell me you'd do it again. If you dumped mud on an innocent person, yes, I would." "She's not innocent. Nobody is." "She was that night. And what you did was cruel." "Cruel." Vanessa tasted the word like poison. "You've killed men, Ethan. You've ordered executions, burned businesses, destroyed families, but I'm cruel because I put a gardener in her place?" "Yes." "Why? Because she reminds you of your dead mother? Because she hummed some song that made you nostalgic?" The words were meant to wound, and they did. Ethan felt the cut but didn't flinch. "Because there's a difference between violence for purpose and violence for pleasure. I've done terrible things, Vanessa. I know exactly what I am. But I've never enjoyed making someone suffer." "And you think I did?" "I know you did. I saw your face." Vanessa's composure cracked, just for a moment. Something raw flashed across her features. Anger, yes, but underneath it, something that might have been shame. She recovered quickly, but Ethan had seen it. "You don't know anything about me," she said quietly. "Then explain. Help me understand why you needed to destroy someone who couldn't fight back." The waiter returned with their food, and they sat in tense silence while plates were arranged, water glasses refilled, pepper offered, and declined. The interruption gave Vanessa time to rebuild her walls, to slip back into the cold mask she wore for the world. When they were alone again, she cut into her salad with surgical precision. "You want to understand?" She speared a piece of lettuce. "Fine. I spent my entire life watching my father groom my brother to take over the family business. Michael, lazy, entitled Michael, who's never had an original thought in his life. But he's a man, so he gets the empire. Me? I'm supposed to be decorative, marry well, strengthen alliances, be a pretty bridge between families. So you took out your frustration on Lila? I took out my frustration on the situation." Vanessa's knife scraped against the plate. "You were supposed to be my victory, my proof that I could deliver strategic wins, that I was valuable beyond my gender. And then this girl appears, covered in dirt, and you look at her like—" She stopped, struggling with words. "Like she matters, like she's more interesting than all my carefully cultivated perfection. She was humming my mother's song. I know, I figured that out later." Vanessa set down her fork. "But in that moment, all I saw was another woman threatening what I'd worked for. And I reacted badly. You tortured her. I humiliated her. There's a difference. Not to her." They stared at each other across untouched food, two people raised in violence trying to find common language. "The information you sent me about Michael," Vanessa said, changing subjects. "It's real?" "Every word. We verified everything twice." "Why? Why give it to me for free?" Ethan leaned forward. "Because Lila had an interesting insight. She said, your anger isn't really about her. It's about losing control, losing power, losing your chance to prove yourself. So we found you a different victory. By destroying my brother. By protecting your family from someone who would sell it out for personal gain. The fact that it also secures your position is just a bonus." Vanessa studied him, and for the first time since he'd known her, the calculation in her eyes looked uncertain. "You could have used that information yourself. Made deals with the Morettis, undermined my father's position, weakened the entire Cole family." "I could have. But you gave it to me instead." "Yes." "Why?" It was the same question Lila had asked in the garden. Why save her? Why sacrifice everything? Why choose mercy over strategy? "Because I'm tired," Ethan said honestly. "Tired of wars that never end, alliances that only last until someone finds a better deal, games where everyone loses eventually. My father spent his entire life fighting, and it killed everything good in him. I don't want to become that." "So you're what? Reforming? The Butcher of Brooklyn is going soft?" "I'm trying to be something other than what I was raised to be." Vanessa laughed, but it held less edge than before. "That's the most naive thing I've ever heard from someone in our business." "Probably. You'll get killed." "Maybe." "And this gardener, Lila, she's worth dying for?" Ethan thought about Lila in the garden, teaching him to deadhead roses. Lila in strategy meetings, asking questions that cut through years of conditioning. Lila's hand gripping his shirt, demanding he promise to come back. "She's worth not becoming the kind of person who dumps mud on someone for entertainment," he said. "That's enough." The words hit Vanessa visibly. She looked away, jaw tight, and for a moment Ethan saw past the perfect facade to something vulnerable underneath. "I'm not a monster," she said quietly. "I never said you were. But you think it. You looked at me that night and saw something ugly. I saw someone raised in the same world I was, someone taught that power comes from dominance, that showing weakness is death, that other people are tools or threats, but never just people." He paused. "I saw myself, and I didn't like it." Vanessa's hands clenched into fists on the table. "So this whole thing, breaking our engagement, protecting your gardener, sending me information about Michael, it's all what? Penance? You're trying to buy your way into heaven?" "I'm trying to sleep at night. By destroying everything we could have built together? We would have built an empire on fear and cruelty. I don't want that anymore." "What do you want?" It was a genuine question, asked without the armor of sarcasm or rage. Vanessa was actually asking what Ethan Cross wanted, maybe the first time anyone had bothered to ask in years. "I want to prove my mother was right," he said, "that people can change, that being born into violence doesn't mean dying in it, that there's something more than just survival." Vanessa was quiet for a long moment, pushing food around her plate. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "Your mother sounds like she was an idiot. She was kind. That's not the same thing." "In our world, it is." Vanessa finally looked up. "But she was lucky, too. She had someone who loved her enough to try to be better. My father loved my mother until she got sick, and then he loved the bottle more. Michael loves only himself. And me?" Her smile was bitter. "I don't think I know how to love anything that can't be controlled." "That's not true." "How would you know?" "Because you came here today. Because you listened to my offer instead of just killing me. Because somewhere under all that armor, you're still capable of choosing differently." Vanessa shook her head. "You're projecting, seeing what you want to see." "Maybe. But the information I sent you proves one thing. I can be useful. The question is whether you can be pragmatic enough to accept help from someone who rejected you." This was the crux of it, the real negotiation. Could Vanessa's pride accept partnership with the man who'd humiliated her? Could she choose strategy over revenge? She was quiet for so long Ethan thought he'd lost her. Then she pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. On the screen was a text message draft, ready to send. It was addressed to her father and contained a detailed plan for using Ethan's information to remove Michael from succession, secure Vanessa's position, and restructure the Cole family's leadership. At the bottom, a proposed treaty with the Cross family, not marriage, but a business alliance based on mutual benefit and shared intelligence. "I wrote this last night," Vanessa said, "after your package arrived. I've been staring at it for 12 hours, trying to decide if sending it makes me smart or weak." Ethan read through the proposal. It was brilliant, protecting her interests while leaving room for peace between their families. It gave Vincent a way to save face, gave Vanessa the power she wanted, and ended the war before it really began. "Send it," he said. "Just like that?" "You don't need my permission. You never did. That's the whole point." Vanessa took back her phone, finger hovering over the send button. "If I do this, if I let you walk away from what you did to me, everyone will think I'm weak, that I let you win. Or they'll think you're smart enough to turn an enemy into an asset, that you saw the bigger picture while everyone else was focused on pride. You're good at this. The manipulation. I learned from the best." She almost smiled. Then her expression turned serious. "I need something in return." "Name it." "The girl, Lila. I need to meet her." Every protective instinct Ethan had screamed no. "Why?" "Because I need to understand what you saw in her that you didn't see in me. Because I dumped mud on her, and that apparently means something to you. Because—" Vanessa's voice cracked slightly. "Because I need to apologize." The word hung in the air like a foreign language. "You want to apologize?" Ethan couldn't hide his shock. "Don't sound so surprised. I'm capable of admitting when I'm wrong. I just rarely am." Her attempt at humor fell flat. "Look, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking to be friends. But if I'm going to live with what I did that night, I need to at least try to make it right." Ethan studied her face, looking for the trap, the angle, the hidden knife. But all he saw was exhaustion and something that might have been genuine regret. "I'll ask her," he said finally, "but it's her choice. If she says no, you respect that." "Fair." But Vanessa hit send on the message to her father. The swoosh of it departing felt like the sound of a world shifting. "Now what?" Ethan asked. "Now we wait to see if my father accepts peace or chooses war." She stood, smoothing her dress. "Either way, you and I are done. Not enemies, not allies, just two people who almost destroyed each other and decided there were better uses for our time." She extended her hand. Ethan shook it, feeling the same calculated strength as their first meeting, but without the promise of false intimacy. "Take care of your gardener," Vanessa said. "And Ethan, next time you want to save someone, try not to burn down half the city doing it." She left, heels clicking across the restaurant floor, back straight and head high. Every inch a Cole, but maybe something more now, too. Ethan sat alone with cold steak and the weight of what had just happened. His phone buzzed. Marcus, demanding an update. He texted back a single word. Safe. Then he called for the check and headed back to the mansion where Lila was waiting. She met him at the door, Marcus hovering protectively nearby. The relief on her face when she saw him alive and whole was almost painful. You're okay, she breathed. I'm okay. And Vanessa? We talked. Really talked. He guided her toward the study, away from the guards and staff. She's calling off the war, sending a treaty proposal to her father. Lila's eyes went wide. It worked? The information about Michael actually worked? Better than that. She understood why I did what I did. Not forgave, but understood. That's something. They sat in the study, and Ethan told her everything. The conversation, Vanessa's confession about feeling powerless, the proposal she'd sent, the apology she wanted to make. Lila listened in silence, processing. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. She wants to apologize to me? Her voice was small. Only if you want to hear it. No pressure, no expectations. Your choice. What do you think I should do? Ethan thought about his mother, who'd believed in second chances, about the choice he'd made in the garden that had led to all this chaos, about the difference between justice and mercy. I think people deserve the chance to be better than their worst moment, he said. But I also think you don't owe her forgiveness. Whatever you decide, I support it. Lila stood, moving to the window that overlooked the gardens. The roses were blooming despite everything, indifferent to human drama. When I was 17, she said quietly, I was working at a diner in Georgia. There was this regular customer, a businessman who always left big tips. One night he got drunk and handsy. When I rejected him, he made a scene, called me names, threw his drink at me, humiliated me in front of the whole restaurant. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. The next week he came back, Lila continued. Sober. Apologized. Said he'd been going through a divorce, wasn't handling it well, took it out on me, and that was wrong. He looked me in the eye and said he was sorry. Did you forgive him? I never went near his table again, but I let him keep coming to the diner. Let him prove through his actions that the apology meant something. She turned back to face Ethan. Maybe that's what Vanessa needs. Not forgiveness, but the chance to prove she's more than her worst moment. You're kinder than most people. I'm practical. If Vanessa's serious about peace, refusing to see her just feeds resentment. Better to hear her out, let her say what she needs to say, and move forward. Ethan crossed the room and took her hands. You're remarkable, you know that? Lila smiled, sad and tired. I'm terrified, but I'm learning that fear doesn't have to stop you from doing the right thing. The meeting was arranged for 3 days later, giving Vincent Cole time to respond to his daughter's proposal, and both families time to prepare. The response came on day 2, a terse acceptance of the treaty terms, with the added stipulation that Michael Cole would be quietly removed from all family business and sent to manage their European operations. Translation: exile. Vanessa had won. Vanessa. When she arrived at the Cross estate, she came alone as promised, wearing simple black instead of her usual power colors. Lila waited in the conservatory, surrounded by glass and greenery, with Ethan positioned nearby but giving them space. The two women stood facing each other, Vanessa tall and polished, Lila small and plainly dressed. They couldn't have looked more different. Thank you for seeing me, Vanessa said. Lila nodded, her face carefully neutral. I owe you an apology. What I did that night was inexcusable. You were doing your job, minding your own business, and I turned you into a target for my anger and insecurity. Vanessa's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. There's no excuse for it, no justification. I was cruel, and you didn't deserve it. Why? Lila asked. Why me? Because you were there, because Ethan noticed you. Because in that moment, I saw everything I'd worked for slipping away and I needed someone to blame. But Vanessa took a breath. I've spent my whole life being told that power comes from dominance, that showing weakness invites destruction, that other people are either useful or expendable. And I believed it, until I saw Ethan's face when I dumped that mud on you. What did you see? Disgust, not at you, at me, at what I'd become. Vanessa's composure cracked. I saw myself through his eyes and realized I'd turned into exactly the kind of person I claimed to despise. cruel for cruelty's sake, enjoying someone's suffering because it made me feel powerful. Lila studied her for a long moment. I don't forgive you. The words were quiet but firm. Vanessa flinched but nodded. I don't expect you to. I just needed you to know that I see what I did, that it matters, that you matter, even if I couldn't see it that night. Good. Lila stepped closer. Because I'm not going anywhere. This world you and Ethan live in, this business of violence and power, I'm part of it now, whether you like it or not. Something like respect flickered in Vanessa's eyes. I see why he chose you. He didn't choose me. He chose to be better than what you offered. I just happened to be there. Don't sell yourself short. It takes strength to stand here and face me. Most people would have run. I thought about it every day for the past 2 weeks. Lila's voice strengthened. But running would mean you won, would mean cruelty wins, and I'm not giving you that. Vanessa actually smiled, small and genuine. You're tougher than you look. I've had to be. They stood in the conservatory, two women shaped by violence in different ways, finding an understanding that wasn't friendship, but wasn't enmity either. Just recognition. The treaty my father accepted includes provisions for your protection, Vanessa said. Anyone who touches you answers to both our families. You're under Cross and Cole protection now. I don't want protection from you. Too bad. You're getting it anyway. Consider it part of my apology. Lila looked at Ethan, who shrugged. He'd negotiated that clause specifically, insurance against anyone thinking Lila was still a soft target. Fine, Lila said, but we're not friends. Agreed, but we're not enemies either. What are we then? Vanessa considered this. Two people trying to survive in a world that wasn't built for mercy. That's something. After Vanessa left, Lila stood in the conservatory for a long time, staring at the glass ceiling. Ethan joined her, giving her space to process. You okay? He asked finally. I don't know. I think so. She turned to him. Is it weird that I almost liked her? At the end? Not weird, she's complicated. Most people are, under the armor. She's still dangerous. Absolutely, but maybe dangerous in a different direction now. Lila laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in weeks. How did this become my life? 2 weeks ago I was worried about rent. Now I'm negotiating treaties with crime families. Regret it? She thought about this, really thought about it. No, it's terrifying and insane and probably going to get me killed eventually, but it's the first time in years I felt like I matter, like what I do and say has weight. You've always mattered. Not like this. Not where my choices shape actual outcomes. She grabbed his hand. Thank you. For seeing me that night. For choosing differently. For making me part of something bigger than myself. Ethan pulled her close, and she leaned into him like she belonged there. Maybe she did. Maybe they'd both stumbled into something neither had planned, but both needed. So what now? Lila asked against his chest. The war's over. Vanessa's off the revenge train. Your empire is intact. What comes next? It was a good question. Ethan had spent 2 weeks preparing for destruction, learning to accept death as the cost of his choice. Now, improbably, they'd survived. The Cross family stood stronger than before, allied with the Coles through mutual interest instead of marriage. Vanessa had her power. Vincent had stability. And Lila had become something Ethan hadn't known he needed. Not a wife, not an alliance, but a mirror showing him who he could choose to be. Now we rebuild, he said. Not the same empire. Something different, something that doesn't require cruelty to function. That's possible? In your world? I have no idea, but we're going to find out. Marcus appeared at the conservatory entrance, looking uncomfortable. Boss, we have a situation. Of course they did. Peace never lasted long. What kind of situation? Ethan asked. The Moretti family. They heard about the Cole Treaty, and they're not happy. Say it upsets the balance of power, gives you too much control. They're demanding a meeting. Ethan sighed. One war ended, another began. That was the nature of this life. Constant battles, shifting alliances, enemies who became partners, who became enemies again. But looking at Lila, at the gardens beyond the glass, At the possibility of something different, Ethan found himself ready for the fight. "Set up the meeting," he told Marcus. "And this time, Lila sits in." Marcus's eyebrows rose. "Boss?" "She's part of this now. Might as well let everyone know it." After Marcus left, Lila stared at Ethan like he'd lost his mind. "You want me in a meeting with a Mafia family?" "I want them to understand that things are changing, that the Cross family is changing. You're proof of that." "I'm a gardener." "You're the person who helped us avoid a war, who gave Vanessa a path to power that didn't require destroying us, who stood up to the woman who tortured you and demanded respect instead of revenge." Ethan cupped her face. "You're exactly who should be in that meeting." "I have no idea what I'm doing." "Neither did I at first. We'll figure it out together." Lila searched his face, and whatever she saw there made her nod slowly. "Okay, but if they try to dump mud on me, I'm fighting back this time." Ethan laughed, the sound surprising him. When was the last time he genuinely laughed? Before his mother died, probably. Before he'd learned that emotion was weakness and control was everything. "Deal," he said. They stood in the conservatory as the sun set, painting the glass in shades of gold and red. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new enemies, new battles to fight. But tonight, for the first time in 15 years, Ethan Cross felt something that might have been hope. The butcher of Brooklyn was learning to garden, and somehow, impossibly, it felt like the right choice. The Moretti meeting was scheduled for 3 days later, giving Ethan just enough time to teach Lila the fundamentals of negotiating with people who viewed murder as a business expense. They spent hours in his study, Marcus acting as an aggressive stand-in for Carlo Moretti, the family patriarch known for his short temper and long memory. "Remember," Ethan coached as Lila stumbled through her 5th practice negotiation, "you don't need to know everything. You need to know enough to ask the right questions. And more importantly, you need to show them you're not afraid." "But I am afraid," Lila said, collapsing into a chair. "Terrified, actually." "That's smart. Fear keeps you sharp. It's panic that gets you killed." Marcus leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "The girl's right to be scared. Carlo Moretti doesn't respect weakness, and he's going to see her as exactly that, a civilian playing dress-up in our world." "Then we prove him wrong," Ethan said. "How? By having her recite facts she memorized 3 days ago? Carlo's been in this business longer than she's been alive. Which is why she brings something he doesn't have, perspective. Carlo sees everything through the lens of power and territory. Lila sees patterns he's blind to because he's too close to the game." Lila looked between them. "You're putting a lot of faith in someone who was weeding gardens 2 weeks ago." "You helped us avoid a war with the Cole family," Ethan reminded her. "That's more than most of my advisors have accomplished in their entire careers." The day of the meeting arrived with the kind of crystal-clear weather that felt like a mockery of the tension crackling through the mansion. Ethan dressed Lila himself, choosing a charcoal suit that was professional without being pretentious, elegant without trying too hard. She stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing herself. "I look like I'm playing pretend," she said. "You look like someone who belongs here." Ethan adjusted her collar. "Trust me." "That's asking a lot." "I know, but you trusted me when I was a stranger who'd just blown up his engagement. Surely you can trust me now." She turned to face him, and the fear in her eyes was real, but so was the determination. "Don't let me embarrass you." "Impossible. You could show up in your gardening overalls and you'd still be the most real person in that room." The meeting was held in neutral territory again, a private room at an upscale gentlemen's club that had hosted mob negotiations since Prohibition. Ethan arrived with Lila at his side and Marcus trailing 3 steps behind, the picture of controlled power. Carlo Moretti was already there, flanked by his son Paolo and his underboss, a granite-faced man named Sal. Carlo himself looked like someone's kind grandfather, white hair, warm smile, expensive cardigan over his dress shirt. The effect was deliberately disarming, which made him more dangerous, not less. "Ethan Cross," Carlo said, standing to shake hands. "Good to see you. I was sorry to hear about your engagement troubles." "Not troubles, changes," Ethan corrected smoothly. "Carlo Moretti, Paolo, Sal, I'd like you to meet Lila Hayes." 3 pairs of eyes turned to Lila, assessing, calculating, dismissing. She felt the weight of their judgment like physical pressure, but she extended her hand to Carlo without trembling. Mr. Moretti, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Carlo's handshake was brief, perfunctory. Miss Hayes, I admit I'm curious why the Cross family's new advisor is, forgive me, a gardener. Former gardener, Lila said. Now I'm whatever Mr. Cross needs me to be. Paolo Moretti snorted. And what exactly does he need you for? Arranging flowers at the negotiating table? The insult hung in the air. Marcus tensed, ready to respond, but Lila spoke first. Actually, yes. Arranging things is exactly what I do. Taking separate elements and finding the pattern that makes them work together. Knowing what needs to be cut away and what needs room to grow. It's not so different from negotiation, really. The room went quiet. Carlo's eyes sharpened with interest. Interesting perspective, he said, gesturing to the chairs. Please, sit. Let's discuss why you requested this meeting. They settled around the table, Ethan and Lila on one side, the Morettis on the other, with guards positioned strategically around the room. Coffee was poured, pastries offered, and declined. The ritual of hospitality that barely masked the underlying threat. I understand you have concerns about the Cross-Coal Treaty, Ethan began. Concerns is putting it mildly, Carlo said. You've allied with the largest pharmaceutical operation on the eastern seaboard. That gives you control of supply chains that affect all of us. The balance of power is fundamentally shifted. The treaty is defensive, not offensive. We're not looking to expand territory. Not yet. But alliances change. Today's defense becomes tomorrow's conquest. Carlo's smile never wavered. I've been in this business 40 years, Ethan. I know how these things evolve. Then you also know that stability benefits everyone, Lila interjected. All eyes turned to her. The war between Cross and Coal would have destabilized the entire region. Other families would have been drawn in, territories contested, supply lines disrupted. The treaty prevents that. Paolo leaned forward. And we're supposed to believe that out of the goodness of your hearts? That there's no strategic advantage being played here? Of course there's strategic advantage, Lila said, but it's not the advantage you think. The Cross family isn't positioning for expansion. They're positioning for transformation. Transformation into what? Sal spoke for the first time, his voice like gravel. Lila glanced at Ethan, who nodded permission. She took a breath and dove in. Into a business model that doesn't require constant warfare to maintain. Mr. Cross has been studying the conflicts between families over the past decade. The average war costs each side millions in lost revenue, legal fees, and recovery. And for what? To shift boundaries by a few blocks? To gain territory that requires constant defense? It's inefficient. Carlo's expression shifted from dismissive to curious. Go on. The Coal Alliance isn't about conquest. It's about creating a framework where cooperation is more profitable than conflict, where intelligence sharing prevents wars before they start, where resources can be pooled for mutual benefit instead of fought over. She pulled out a folder, Ethan's idea, making her look prepared. We've run the numbers. If the 5 major families operated as a cooperative instead of competitors, revenue increases across the board by an estimated 30%, while costs drop by nearly half. Paolo grabbed the folder, flipping through the financial projections. His expression changed from skepticism to surprise. These numbers are real? He asked Ethan. Verified by 3 independent analysts, all of them reaching the same conclusion. Cooperation is more profitable than war. Carlo sat back, fingers steepled. And you think the families would accept this? Generations of competition, centuries of tradition, and you want us to what? Hold hands and sing together? I want you to stop bleeding money for pride, Ethan said bluntly. The old ways worked when territories were clear and law enforcement was paid off. But the world's changed. Federal task forces, RICO statutes, digital surveillance. The tools being used against us are evolving faster than we are. We either adapt or we die. By becoming legitimate? By becoming sustainable. There's a difference. Sal spoke again, his voice skeptical. And the Cole family agreed to this? Vanessa Cole, who's built her reputation on being ruthless, is suddenly interested in cooperation? Vanessa Cole is interested in power, Lila said. We showed her a path to more power through alliance than through marriage. She's pragmatic enough to take it. But And you? What's your stake in all this, Miss Hayes? Carlo's eyes were sharp, reading her like a contract. A gardener who suddenly cares about mob economics? Forgive me if I find that suspicious. This was the moment. Lila could deflect, hide behind Ethan's protection, play the role of innocent bystander. Or she could tell the truth. She chose truth. My stake is that I'm tired of watching people destroy each other for reasons they can't even remember. My mother has Alzheimer's. She's in a facility that costs more than I make in a year, and I work 3 jobs trying to keep her there. You know what she remembers? Nothing. Not my name, not her own name, not any of the grudges and fights and reasons she thought mattered when she was healthy. It's all gone. The room was silent. You people, Lila continued, her voice strengthening, you hold on to hatred like it's treasure. Territory your grandfather fought for. Insults from decades ago, feuds nobody can even trace back to the original cause. And for what? So you can die knowing you didn't back down? That's not strength, that's just sad. Paulo looked ready to explode, but Carlo held up a hand. You think we're fools, he said quietly, fighting over nothing. I think you're trapped by tradition. There's a difference. Lila met his eyes. My mother fought my father for 20 years, bitter, ugly fighting over money and respect, and who said what? And now she can't remember any of it, can't remember why she hated him so much. Can't remember if it was worth the 2 decades of misery. The hatred is gone, but the wasted years aren't coming back. And this is supposed to convince us to trust the Cross family? It's supposed to convince you to ask yourself what you're actually fighting for. Is it territory? Money? Or is it just because that's what you've always done, and changing feels like weakness? The silence stretched. Then Carlo started laughing, not mockery, but genuine amusement. Paulo, he said to his son, remind me never to underestimate gardeners again. The tension broke. Even Sal cracked something that might have been a smile. Miss Hayes makes interesting points, Carlo continued, though I notice the proposal conveniently positions the Cross family to benefit most from this new cooperative model. Because we're taking the risk of being first, Ethan said. The Cole Alliance proves the concept works. We're offering the same framework to the Moretti family. Intelligence sharing, resource pooling, joint operations where it benefits both sides. You maintain autonomy, but gain stability. And if we refuse, then nothing changes. We honor existing boundaries, maintain current arrangements, and continue as we have been. But the offer stands if you change your mind. Carlo looked at his son, at Sal, having an entire conversation with glances and subtle head movements. Years of working together made words unnecessary. Finally, Carlo turned back to them. I'll need to discuss this with my people, but I'm willing to explore the possibility. Tentatively. He stood, signaling the meeting's end. Miss Hayes, you've given me much to think about. Perhaps there's wisdom in perspectives from outside our usual circles. Lila stood and shook his hand again, this time meeting his eyes as an equal. Thank you for listening. After the Morettis left, Marcus let out a breath he'd been holding. That went better than expected. Better than expected? Ethan looked at Lila with something like awe. You just convinced Carlo Moretti to consider cooperation. Do you have any idea how impossible that should have been? Lila was shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. I thought I was going to throw up the entire time. You didn't show it. You stood there and called them out for wasting decades on grudges, and somehow made it sound reasonable instead of insulting. Did I actually help? Or did I just get lucky? You helped, Marcus said grudgingly. Moretti respects straight talk. Most people are too afraid to give it to him. You weren't. Over the next 2 weeks, the impossible became real. Carlo Moretti agreed to a trial alliance, limited intelligence sharing, and one joint operation to test the waters. Antonio Castellano, hearing about the developments, reached out to discuss similar arrangements. Even the Zhang family, historically the most isolated of the 5, sent diplomatic inquiries. Ethan's empire was transforming, brick by brick, from a fortress under siege to something that looked almost like a legitimate business network. Not clean, they were still criminals, still operating in gray and black markets, but sustainable in a way the old model never was. And at the center of it all was Lila Hayes, the gardener who'd accidentally become the architect of peace. She moved through the mansion now with growing confidence, sitting in on meetings, offering insights that came from outside the usual mob mentality. The guards who'd initially dismissed her began seeking her opinion. Associates who'd questioned her presence started running ideas by her before presenting them to Ethan. She was becoming what Ethan had seen that first night in the garden, someone who mattered. 1 month after the coal treaty, Ethan found Lila in her usual spot among the roses, hands deep in the soil despite having an office and a title and a salary that dwarfed her old 3-job income. "You can pay someone to do that now," he observed, sitting beside her on the grass. "I know, but I like it. Keeps me grounded." She smiled at her own pun. Literally. "The Moretti Alliance is holding. Antonio signed on yesterday. Zhang is still hesitant but sending positive signals. That's good. More than good. It's revolutionary. In 6 months, we've restructured relationships that have been hostile for generations." He watched her work, the familiar rhythm of her hands that had first caught his attention. "My mother would have loved you." Lila sat back, wiping dirt from her fingers. Would she? A gardener who stumbled into mob politics. A gardener who saw people instead of players, who asked what they were fighting for instead of just how to win, who believed people could be better than their worst moments. He touched her face, the bruise from Vanessa's slap long faded. That's what she believed too, that there was always a choice. "And you? What do you believe now?" Ethan thought about the man he'd been a month ago, the butcher of Brooklyn, defined by violence and calculation. That man would have married Vanessa, would have built an empire on cruelty, would have become exactly what his father had been after his mother died. "I believe I made the right choice," he said. "In the garden. When I snapped that ring box shut and chose to be something other than what I was raised to be. Even though it almost got us killed. Especially because of that. Easy choices don't change anything. Hard ones reshape the world." Lila leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, mud-stained hands leaving prints on his expensive suit. He didn't care. "What happens now?" she asked. "The alliances are holding, the families are cooperating, Vanessa's focused on consolidating her power. Where do we go from here?" It was a good question. Ethan had spent so long preparing for war that peace felt strange, unfamiliar, like learning a new language after years of speaking only violence. "We build," he said finally, "not just empire. Something worth protecting. Something my mother would recognize." That's ambitious. "So is turning 5 mob families into a cooperative. We've done one impossible thing. Might as well try for another." They sat in the garden as the sun set, painting the roses in shades of gold. Inside the mansion, Marcus was coordinating security. In the study, Antonio's people were finalizing joint operation details. Across the city, Vanessa Cole was probably consolidating power with the information they'd provided. The whole network they'd built was humming along, functional and profitable, and remarkably violence-free. It wouldn't last forever. Ethan knew that. Peace in their world was always temporary, always fragile. Someone would test the boundaries eventually. Old grudges would resurface. New conflicts would emerge. But for now, tonight, they had something rare. Possibility. 3 months later, Ethan stood in the conservatory watching Lila train a new hire. A young associate who'd been causing problems until someone suggested giving him to Lila for perspective adjustment. She was teaching him about root systems and growth patterns, using garden metaphors to explain territory management and sustainable expansion. The kid was actually listening. "She's good at this," Marcus observed, appearing at Ethan's shoulder. "Better than half our experienced people. She sees what they can't, the patterns under the surface." "Think she'll stay? Or will she eventually get tired of the violence and go back to civilian life?" Ethan had wondered the same thing. Lila was thriving in her role, but she'd also witnessed 3 assassination attempts, 2 territory disputes, and 1 near war with the Zhang family over a misunderstanding about port access. The stress was real, the danger constant. "I think," he said slowly, "she'll stay as long as we keep choosing to be better. The day we stop trying, the day we slip back into the old ways, that's when she'll leave." That's a lot of pressure. It's the right pressure, the kind that keeps us honest. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You love her." It wasn't a question. Ethan didn't answer immediately, watching Lila laugh at something the young associate said, her whole face lighting up with genuine warmth. Yeah, he admitted. I do. Does she know? Probably. She's smart enough to read between the lines. You gonna tell her? Eventually, when the time's right. Boss, you destroyed an alliance, started a revolution, and rebuilt the entire family business around her. I think she knows. Ethan smiled. Maybe, but I want to say it anyway. When we're not in crisis mode, when it can just be us, without mob politics and death threats and strategic considerations. That might be never, in our world. Then I'll make a moment that is. He did, 2 weeks later. No grand gesture, no roses or diamonds or elaborate staging, just Lila and Ethan in the garden where everything had started, after a long day of negotiations that had finally secured the Zhang alliance. They sat on the stone wall, watching the sun set over the estate that had transformed from a fortress to something almost like a home. I've been thinking, Ethan said. Dangerous. About the future, what it looks like, what I want it to be. Lila turned to face him, curiosity in her honey-colored eyes. And what do you want it to be? This, us, building something that matters instead of just surviving. He took her hand, feeling the calluses from garden work that she'd never let fade completely. You changed everything, Lila. Not just the business model or the family alliances. You changed me, made me believe I could be something other than what I was raised to be. You did that yourself. I just asked questions. You did more than that. You showed me what courage looks like. Real courage, not the kind that comes from having guns and money and power. The kind that comes from standing up even when you're terrified. From choosing mercy when revenge is easier. From believing people can be better. Tears welled in Lila's eyes. Ethan, I love you, he said simply. Not because you saved me, or because you're brilliant at strategy, or because you somehow managed to make mobsters care about sustainable business practices. I love you because you're you. Because you hum while you garden and get mud on expensive furniture and see people instead of tools or threats. Because you make me want to be worthy of the choice I made in this garden. Lila was crying now, but smiling through the tears. That's the most terrifying, beautiful thing anyone's ever said to me. Terrifying? Because I love you too. And in your world, love is a weakness that gets exploited. Then we'll protect it. The same way we protected the alliance, the same way we built peace from war. Together. She kissed him then, and it tasted like hope and dirt, and the future they were building brick by careful brick. When they finally pulled apart, Lila laughed softly. Your mother would have liked this. Us. She would have loved you. Think she'd be proud of what you've become. Ethan thought about the man his mother had married, the one who'd tried to be better, who'd planted gardens and sung songs and believed in second chances, the man who'd died with her, leaving only the butcher of Brooklyn behind. I think, he said, she'd say I'm finally becoming the man she always believed I could be. 6 months after the garden incident that had changed everything, the 5 families held their first official summit. Not a tense negotiation or a power play, but an actual meeting to discuss shared interests and coordinate operations. It was held in the Cross Mansion, in the conservatory surrounded by Lila's gardens, because everyone agreed that neutral ground should be beautiful. Ethan stood at the head of the table, Lila at his right hand, looking out at representatives from Cole, Moretti, Castellano, and Zhang families. A year ago, this gathering would have been impossible. Now it was just Tuesday. Thank you all for coming, he began. I know this arrangement is still new, still strange for those of us raised on competition and territory. But the numbers speak for themselves. Revenue is up across all families. Legal troubles are down. And we've gone 6 months without a single major conflict. It helps that Miss Hayes keeps threatening to make us garden if we fight, Carlo Moretti said, and the room actually laughed. Lila smiled. I prefer to think of it as therapeutic soil contact, very grounding. The summit proceeded smoothly, discussions of territory optimization, resource sharing, and a joint legal defense fund. Boring, bureaucratic, the kind of meeting that would have put the old Ethan to sleep. But this Ethan found it beautiful. Because boring meant stable. Bureaucratic meant sustainable. And meetings where nobody died meant they were doing something right. Vanessa Cole attended as the official representative of her family, her father having stepped back to let her take the lead. She caught Ethan's eye across the table and nodded once. Not friendship, but respect. They'd never be close, but they'd found a way to coexist that didn't require destruction. After the summit ended, after the families had left and the guards stood down and the mansion returned to its baseline tension, Ethan found Lila in the garden where roses bloomed despite the approaching winter. She'd made them bloom year-round through careful cultivation and sheer stubbornness, the same way she'd made peace bloom in a world built for war. "We did it," she said without turning around. 6 months of peace, that's got to be a record. "It's a start." He joined her among the roses, their familiar scent mixing with the cold air. "Think it'll last?" "Nothing lasts forever, but we built something strong enough to weather storms. That's all we can do." Ethan pulled out a small box from his pocket. Not the 3-carat diamond he'd bought for Vanessa, but something simpler. A silver band with a single small stone, nothing flashy or strategic, just a ring that meant what it said. Lila saw it and went very still. "I'm not proposing an alliance," Ethan said. "I'm not asking you to be a bridge between families or a strategic asset. I'm asking you to marry me because I love you, because I want to build a life with you that's more than just surviving, because you make me believe in second chances." "That's a terrible reason to propose," Lila said, but she was smiling through tears. "We barely know each other. We met in chaos. Our entire relationship has been one crisis after another." "I know. And my mother won't remember the wedding. I have student loans that will take decades to pay off. I still have nightmares about mud in Vanessa's face." "I know. And you're still a criminal. Your business is still illegal. We'll always be looking over our shoulders, always one mistake from everything falling apart." "I know all of that." He took her muddy hand, slipping the ring onto her finger. "And I'm asking anyway. Not because it's smart or strategic or guaranteed to work, but because you're the best choice I ever made, and I want to keep making it every day for the rest of my life." Lila looked at the ring, simple silver catching the last light, and then at Ethan, and then at the gardens they'd built together from chaos and choice. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it. The chaos and the danger and the impossible hope that we can be better than what we were raised to be. Yes." They kissed in the garden where empires had fallen and new ones had risen, where mud had been dumped and forgiveness offered, where a mafia boss had chosen mercy over power and found something worth more than both. The roses bloomed around them, indifferent to human drama, focused only on growth. And in the mansion behind them, guards who'd been trained for war relaxed into peace. Associates who'd planned violence coordinated cooperation, and an empire built on blood slowly transformed into something that might one day be mistaken for legitimate. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. There would be setbacks and challenges, old enemies and new threats. The world they lived in didn't forgive weakness, and choosing mercy would always be risky. But Ethan Cross, once known as the Butcher of Brooklyn, now known as the man who'd turned down power for principle, had learned something his father never understood. That the hardest choices were often the most important, that strength came from knowing when not to fight, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act was simply choosing to be kind. He'd thrown away a crown for a girl covered in mud, and in return, she'd shown him how to build a kingdom worth keeping. The story would spread through the underworld for years, whispered in dark rooms and negotiated territories, becoming legend and cautionary tale, and strange inspiration all at once. Some would call it weakness. Others would call it evolution. A few would call it love. All of them would be right. Because in the end, Ethan Cross hadn't just saved a gardener. He'd saved himself. And in doing so, he'd proven that even in a world built on violence and fear, there was always a choice, always a chance to be better, always hope that the next generation might plant gardens instead of graves. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, those gardens would bloom.